Hello, everybody. This is episode 9 of Comic DNA, and on this episode, we are going to be talking about Conrete by Paul Chadwick. My name is Aaron Walter, and with me is Luke Thompson Moritz. Yeah, say hi to everybody, Luke. Would you just yes? So, without any further ado, let's get right into Conrete. It is written and drawn by Paul Chadwick. It was first published in 1986 by Dark Horse, and it ran as a series of short stories through Dark Horse, and then it had a few miniseries, and it spawned into a nice sizable chunk of a series. What Luke and I read is the first book in a series of collections that Dark Horse put out in the mid 2000s. I want to say like 2005. So it just kind of collects the first maybe about five Conrete stories, a bunch of short stories, some of the earliest stuff though. So yeah, Paul Chadwick. Really good writer and artist. Hasn't worked a lot in the comic book industry. He's got some noticeable, or I should say notable credits. He drew the Dazzler comic in the 80s. He drew some issues of Why the Last Man, which is a book I was telling you about, Luke.
Yeah, I recognize the name.
In the Dahmer podcast.
Yes.
And he drew a couple issues of Deadpool, oddly enough.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I couldn't really imagine Deadpool in this art style, but
yeah, he does it. It's interesting. But yeah, I guess Paul is a really good artist, and
oh yeah, he's stellar.
Yeah, I guess he does a lot of work too in the film industry, like storyboards and stuff like that. So, but yeah, so we're going to talk about Conrete. This is a book that I really didn't know a lot about Conrete. I kind of heard of it, but it was actually a gift to me by a friend of mine. Actually, it was Alex who did the Weapon X podcast with us.
Yeah, I'll have to thank him for that.
Yes, yeah, he's a comic book aficionado, and so he correctly assumed that this would be something that I would be into, and so he totally turned me on to it, and I've been a fan of it ever since. So yeah, Conrete. Luke, I can't really ask you for a plot synopsis since
because there's a couple different plots going on.
What we read was, like I said, it's a collection of short stories. But what would you just say is a synopsis of Conrete?
The kind of general idea.
The general idea behind the series.
Okay. I would say that it is taking the idea of like a super-powered being, I guess, to a degree, and kind of disconnecting it from normal superhero tropes, and like setting him in a real-world setting, like, you know, showing how a person, quote unquote, would go about doing normal daily things, just even like sitting in a chair, you know, how he deals with the publicity of being I guess, one of the only superheroes, quote unquote, in the world. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Just typically just taking a superhero and disconnecting him from normal superhero things.
Yeah, the story...
And superhero is kind of a blanket term. That's kind of taking a little bit of a stretch in this context, but...
Yeah, in the introduction to this book, and I'm sure he's talked about it in other places, Paul Chadwick, he kind of explains how, like, some of the origin is, like, his idea of the Marvel Comics character, the Thing, you know, which is a great character, one of Marvel's best characters, and because they really captured the tragedy of being a superhero with that character, and this series is really sort of an extension of that, because it's a lot of the idea behind the Thing, which is a guy being trapped in like a big monster body, so he's not really human anymore. In the case of Conrete, it's practically like the Thing. Instead of a big rock hide, he's just like a big human-shaped piece of concrete, and his brain has been transplanted into this body. And the stories, like the comics themselves, are really much more grounded in the real world and realism. So like you said, it's really separated from classic superhero tropes, and it's more of like little character dramas. But the character dramas all happen to involve this guy and his unique perspective of not really being human anymore, and being kind of in this high concept monster superhero position. And it's a really unique book as a result of
It's really
that.
deep. You
Yeah,
know,
it's really deep.
a
Yeah.
lot of the dialogue, or a lot of the dialogue is him just kind of thinking to himself or monologuing to himself and the reader, and it made me think a lot, like just kind of get taken aback for a second and kind of analyzing.
Well, like I said, they're real emotional stories, because it mostly involves not just Conrete, but also his like two assistants.
Yeah, Larry
his
and
supporting
Maureen.
cast. Yeah, Larry and Maureen. A Marine who is a doctor who is studying him, and Larry, who's basically Conrete's aide, who just kind of documents what he does and writes down his thoughts. Because one of the things about with Conrete being in this, what they say, it's like a 9 foot tall body,
Yeah,
weighs
1,200 pounds. Yeah,
1,200 pounds. So he's got these giant rock fingers, so he can't really type. It's difficult for him to write, and that's one of the things that the book focuses on, little things like that, how his everyday life is affected by being in this body. So he has to have this aide who,
and he can't even be transported normally. Like they have to have a
he has to sit in the flatbed of a truck when they drive around. Because he can't fit in a car, and it's not a superhero world where they just have super technology planes that can just fly him around wherever he wants.
Though he does fly on a plane at one point.
Well, he does, yeah. Like he flies in freighters. Like planes can fly him, but I mean there's no like Mr. Fantastic hover car to just lift up the skyscraper and take him down.
Takes so much more of that, like you were saying, the tragic element of being stuck in this body, and amplifies it. Because with the Thing, it's like, yeah, he's stuck in a tragic body, but they have that family dynamic, and he gets to be the hero, and
it's also like the fantasy world
where you get to succeed.
There's little bits of super science there to kind of like gloss over a lot of the real difficulties you would have in a body like that.
But with Conrete, it's a lot of he gets like tiny victories. Like he goes to that kid's birthday party at one point in the story, and he ends up enjoying himself even though he didn't think he would, and it's like tiny victories like that instead of like he gets to save the world and gets commercially recognized and blah blah blah. It's like he's got real person problems, but kind of on like a Paul Bunyan scale.
Right. So let's kind of explain. Let's kind of get into some of the details of the stories.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and start with. Well, okay. So let's actually just go with the first story.
Just go chronologically.
Yeah. Let's just kind of go through the book. So.
Okay.
So the first story where we were introduced to Conrete, we're introduced to him through the eyes of Larry, because Larry is set up as the sort of the point of view character. He's
the mediator kind of thing.
Yeah, he goes to college. He's got no job. He's got no money, and so he's kind of desperate.
I thought it was funny too. Like every time someone says, "Oh, you're an author. What are you writing?" Well, I've got this book, it's about this depressed guy, right? And every time.
Joke.
Yeah, it's just, that's it.
That's such a good, like, if you've ever been around people who want to be writers, I am one of those people. I am somebody who wants to be a writer. And you hear that all the time of people, like, when you ask them, like, what do they write about? And they can't explain it succinctly. They just start kind of telling you like the plot or loose ideas. That's such a dig on like wannabe or amateur writers who can't like succinctly talk about what they're doing, or even like the higher level of like it's what they're writing about. It's not that it's what you're writing about is not the plot of what you're writing. It's the theme of what you're writing, or the like the emotional tone that you're going for. That's what you write about. You don't write about a long description of a plot idea. That's just that's what your story's about, but that's not what you write about. So that was a good joke,
especially when he was telling Conrete, like after Conrete was or I think it was during the interview where he's talking to Conrete about his story.
Writes about, and Conrete rolls his eyes.
Yeah, and then he gets the phone call and he's like, "Oh, finally."
Yeah.
That was funny. The little funny stuff, yeah.
So we're introduced to Larry, and he answers this job. An ad posted on a jobs listing.
Billboard, yeah. Slightly handicapped man needs an aid to document his,
Yeah, document his life
yeah.
basically. And so Larry goes and he sees that it's Conrete, and Conrete is kind of famous. The way they establish the story is that there's a media blitz around Conrete, and the story is that he's the first cyborg. His brain has been successfully transplanted into this robot body, and for some reason it looks like a giant rock man. And so Larry basically gets the job, and then the first story kind of sets up. It's almost a superhero story.
Yeah, it's as close as it's gonna get, I would assume.
Yeah, because basically a politician, a senator, friend of Concrete's, calls him and says that there's been a collapsed mine and there's been a bunch of miners trapped, so they would appreciate it if he could go and try to rescue the miners, to see if he could dig them out, do something that the mine,
Professional mining or professional rescue crew can't do.
yeah, exactly. And then it's also ends up being a political favor, so he has to be there to
Take pictures and
like take
smile.
pictures with this
Yeah.
senator in Kentucky. Yeah.
Because the original idea too, I think, was the political friend wanted to make it look like his political friend
Right.
called Concrete personally and got him to respond.
Yes, exactly.
So it would look like he had Concrete on a leash,
Boost
kind of
his
thing.
ratings. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I actually really liked that Concrete failed. You know, like, we're not failed necessarily, but
Well, that's
you know,
so that's the story. The plot of this first story in a nutshell is Concrete goes in and he starts kind of digging out through this crumbling rocks, and he saves two guys and he pulls them out, and then he starts digging more, and then
another cave-in
there's another
happens.
cave
Yeah.
on him. So now he's trapped, and he's trapped in the mine under a ton of rock. The rescue crew keeps working in like a different area of the mine, and they find the rest of the miners, and they're all dead. They've all been crushed by the
First cave-in.
the first
Yeah.
cave-in. Right.
Yeah. They were dead from the get-go.
Right. But so it ends up kind of being this ultimate tragedy where Concrete doesn't really.
He saved the two people that were still alive, though.
Exactly. He saved the two. Well, they did a good job of that, where he saved the two guys, but the whole thing ends up looking like a tragedy because it ends up being a public relations snafu, because it looks like Concrete didn't do anything. Even though he did save the two guys, he wasn't able to save the rest of the crew because they were already dead, and he himself got trapped under a cave in. So it looked like the whole thing was kind of botched. And rather than try to explain everything, they just have to cut their losses and leave. And the media kind of jumps on the whole like celebrity, the worthless celebrity who's just doing it as a political favor instead of somebody who's trying to help.
The reason I liked that too, why I like that he wasn't able to save them, because like I was saying, it disconnects from normal superhero tropes, and the fact that he couldn't just like go in and save everyone made him more believable as a character. Like,
Yeah.
he shouldn't be able to just go in and save these people. He has no idea what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And he even thinks about it too when he's digging through the cave. He's like, what if another cave-in happens? What am I going to do then?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I'm glad that he wasn't able to just go in and be victorious, because
yeah. And right off the bat in this story, they really establish like, okay, so he's got this like super body, this giant, super strong, resilient body, but he's still not completely invincible. Like, there's still danger.
Like, if he falls from a big height, he's gonna shatter.
Yeah. And like, he establishes that he can only hold his breath for about an hour. So if he gets crushed under a couple of tons of rock and he can't move, the air's gonna run out.
He's just gonna suffocate. Yeah.
He's still gonna die.
And like, there's a scene later that someone like shoots a rocket launcher at him, and it obliterates, like, it hits his leg and just obliterates it.
Yeah, that.
And it's like, he's not invincible, and I'm glad, like you were saying, you established it very early,
Mm-hmm.
that he's not invincible.
Yeah.
And it just made him more believable.
Right. So
I really like that.
Well, so what, in a sense, what happens is Paul Chadwick sets up this like superhero character who he is a superhero in that he's more than a regular man. Like, he's got like impeccable vision. This super body that he has impeccable vision. Like, he can see perfectly for miles upon.
Like he can see like plankton when he's underwater and stuff.
And it's like really strong. Like, he's incredibly strong, and he's, you know, resistant to temperatures. He can hold his breath for an hour, he says. But, you know, at the same time, that's still subject to limitations. Exactly.
Yeah.
So even though he's a super person, he still has mortality.
He still has human problems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what it is. He still has the same problems that every human has. They're
just on a bigger scale.
They're on a little bit of a bigger scale, but it's still the same problem.
It's kind of like a Superman thing. Like, Superman still, you know, he has his relatives visit and stuff, but they just happen to be from another dimension. Conrete still has human problems. They're just much more amplified.
Yeah, you're referring to the Grant Morrison quote about Superman.
Yeah, I just shoehorn that in a little bit.
That's fine. I was just saying what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have the quote verbatim in front of me, but yeah, it's a good quote. Like,
yeah, it's Superman. His problems are on a Paul Bunyan scale.
Yeah, exactly.
When he walks the dog, he walks around the asteroid belt, so on and so forth. And it's a similar situation with Conrete. You know, he still has to breathe. He still has to eat. He still has to, he still gets tired. Like, it just takes longer for it to happen.
Exactly.
Essentially.
Yeah. So one of the things that I like about this book, and this first story really just kind of like set it up, is that the book is just as much about the beauty of Earth as it is about the characters. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You notice it a lot in the next story too.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that like the character of Conrete, one of the things that he does is that he's established as like this famous
speechwriter.
Well, no, that's what he was before he became Conrete.
Oh yeah,
he worked as a speechwriter for the center, his political thing. But then when he becomes Conrete, he establishes himself as like this celebrity, and he basically says, "Well, now that I've got this super body, I'm just gonna kind of go on adventures and write about it. I'm just gonna, do things that normal people couldn't do." So the next story is he's going to swim the Atlantic because nobody's ever done that before. And in future stories, they do things where he like climbs Mount Everest. That's in a future book. You haven't read that one. But there's this real sense of like him taking advantage of the body to experience the world to a degree that no other human can.
So he can write about it for the other humans to experience.
People, exactly.
Yeah.
So even like within the whole like greater super aspects of the character, it's still grounded in this real deep humanity and like this fascination with reality and nature and Earth, which again, it's really good.
It is. It's like you notice it a lot when he's like kind of monologuing to himself or talking to Larry, his aide, where like he's just so vividly describing everything around him because the eyesight thing, he's able to see things that no one could or should be able to see. Like specifically when he's swimming the Atlantic and when he dives down and he sees all the aquatic life up close and personal. He's describing everything to Larry. It was really like, I don't want to say like Tolkien-esque, but a little bit to where it's just so vividly descriptive. If the pictures weren't there, I could have imagined it in a split second because how well it was written and how well it was worded.
Yeah, it is really like in the writing. There's this real sense of wonder. Like you can tell Paul Chadwick is like a big fan of just like nature and the wonder of life, as it is.
Yeah, and I'm glad that there were just like a few spots where he really got to like flex his literacy, I guess you could say, where he just kind of let loose and let a lot of the dialogue speak for itself, sort of thing. Like the imagery was good, but the dialogue really kind of drove it home.
Yeah,
I guess. I really really liked the story where he swam the Atlantic.
Yeah, so that's the next big story.
Generally, I think we hit most of the bases on the first one, right?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
It was sort of just an introduction to the world, which is basically
getting
reality.
us used to the character, getting us accustomed to who he is.
He's somebody who's trying to do good, but
trying to make the best out of what he's got.
Yeah, there are limits to what he can do and limits to what he can experience.
This one, which is a really good segue, this one really tests those limits.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's not really 100% sure of his limits. And him swimming the Atlantic is a gigantic test of what he's capable of.
Yeah, and like again, like they really set up the thoroughness of this concept of swimming the Atlantic. Again, like you would see like a superhero comic where Superman would just like just fly across the Atlantic, or like the Flash would just kind of run across the ocean.
Right.
Like, even,
which is cool in a different context.
Yeah, exactly.
But...
like that's a superhero trope. But in something like this, where you have Conrete, he's going to swim across the Atlantic, which is something that no other human being would be able to do. But even still, he has to have like a pace boat that's keeping track with him. He has
the big flippers.
Yeah, the flippers to help him swim. The steel flippers.
Yeah, the tank on his back.
The flotation tank, because he's really heavy.
He's concrete. He sinks.
Yeah. Like I said, he can only hold his breath for like an hour, so it's not like he can just survive in the ocean.
And just walk across the bottom. Like, they do a test later in the story where he even makes note, like, if this fails, I want to be close enough that I can still just walk to the shore, from the bottom.
Yeah.
Can't do that here. It's obviously Atlantic Ocean. It's far too big. And even throughout him swimming through the Atlantic, there's multiple times where they're asking him if he's okay, and he's like, "Yeah, my arm's kind of stiffening up a bit, but I'm okay still." And I think, later in the story, he just like collapses essentially.
So basically, the basic plot of this story is that they start swimming and they go like a day or two until a big storm comes through.
Yeah.
And Maureen and Larry and the representative of the Guinness Book of World Records, who was there to make sure that it
was legitimate,
so he could keep track of it, they get washed off of the boat in the big storm. So they get cast overboard.
The boat capsizes.
And so they're in a lifeboat. The three of them are stranded in the middle of the ocean, and Conrete is there swimming with them, but he can't.
But he can't be in the boat.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, they have this life raft, and so now it becomes a survival story. And basically, him being Conrete, although it definitely helps in ways, like it helps in ways that saves them. Like they would have died without Conrete there. It's still not just like. He's not just like a superhero who just saves the day. They still have to survive days. I forget how many days it is of him just kind of swimming along with the boat and keeping them from killing each other.
I mean, it's at least probably a week or so,
it feels like
week
a
or
long
two.
Time. Yeah.
Because the fact that they get to the point that they're starving, kind of illustrates that it's a while.
And he's able to keep them alive basically by feeding them, because he catches fish, and he catches a bird, and they're able to cook it in his mouth.
Because he's got a really escalated body temperature.
His internal body temperature is like near boiling.
It's essentially an oven.
So he basically just like opens his mouth, and they pluck the bird and just like set it in his mouth, and it operates like an oven. So they cook the bird.
Which cracks me up.
Yeah.
That I laughed so hard when I saw that.
Yeah, that was good.
But like you were saying, it was because of Conrete that they were saved, but not in a typical superhero, he saved the day fashion.
Yeah,
he
really couldn't do anything to save them, but he helped keep them alive until somebody else could save them.
He even said, I'm not going to let you die.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that. I'm not going to let you die. And with his last big push of energy, he went to go find the boat for them to get into, I believe. Yeah. And it was interesting too. There was multiple times in the story where he was in the water where like his fins broke and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But like I believe it was because he could jump really high that he was able to get around it. But even so, that scene, like the entire part part of this book where like they were shipwrecked and stuck on the life raft was really intense. It was very like the pressure felt on, and it was kind of a chance for Conrete to be a hero, but like you said, not in the typical superhero fashion.
Yeah, I mean, because like the thing about it was like Conrete was stranded too. I think
Yeah. And by this point he was struggling. Like,
yeah,
it was really hard for him to stay afloat.
He could have possibly saved himself by swimming back, but it's hard to say like how far out they were and if he would have been able to actually navigate his way. Like because if he just swam like the wrong direction, just kind of out into the middle of the ocean, he probably would have exhausted himself and then drowned.
Right.
So
slowly, which is terrifying.
Yeah. So it becomes a survivor story for all of them, not just
which is interesting because you don't typically see a superhero survival story. They're normally depicted as invincible, so invincible to a degree.
Yeah, so it's a really good story, and it also really kind of gets into the character drama that I was talking about before, with Maureen and Larry like trapped in the boat, and they kind of have this like little
romantic
intimate moment.
Yeah.
And it really just kind of, the story kind of highlights Conrete's separation from humanity. Like, he can't be intimate with people, and he definitely feels the jealousy that Larry
spends that moment.
Yeah, the closeness that Larry and Maureen have that Conrete can't have, because they kind of get into this more in other, or Paul Chadwick gets into this more in other stories, but like Conrete obviously has a thing for Maureen. Because she's a beautiful, intelligent young woman,
and plus he's been with her since the beginning.
And she's basically like the only person that he's been with constantly since he turned into Conrete,
right.
So yeah, Larry and Maureen have this little intimate moment, and Conrete, that's like just this bittersweet tragedy of they're his friends and he's gonna save them, but it really does suck that he like can't.
Yeah, I really liked another thing about this specific story where they were swimming the Atlantic. I feel like each of the stories kind of let a specific character shine a little more than the others. Like, ultimately it's about Conrete.
Yeah.
That's just how it's going to be. This story kind of showed a little bit of a better side of Maureen and Larry, I guess, even aside from the romance thing, just showed that Maureen cares about Conrete, outside of the job.
Yeah, their friendship with Conrete.
Right, and it showed that Larry's starting to get kind of attached to him. It's past the job thing too, and I like that. I like whenever a book allows the supporting cast to gives the supporting cast a chance to shine, almost as bright as the main character. So I felt like it was a strong supporting cast too, all for a bunch of different reasons, but they all brought something unique to the table.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's character-driven stories, really emotional. Like, it's all about the emotional connection with the characters, and it really does a good job of that.
Oh yeah, it nails it.
Yeah. So yeah, the story where they swim the Atlantic in the end they get saved because Conrete sees an oil tanker in the far off distance, and he's able to swim to the tanker, basically exhausting himself to the point. It's a good sequence where like by the time he gets to the tanker, he's covered in seaweed and he's exhausted to such a degree that he can't talk. Like, his body's just not functioning. So
they looks like the Swamp Thing.
Yeah,
whenever
the sailors
he
just think it's a monster climbing up the boat. Just this big seaweed ocean.
And then they keep trying to shoot at him and take him down. Obviously, it's not going to do anything. He ends up just taking the boat. And, he takes control of the boat and, directs it towards the boat. And the captain just goes, "Oh."
Yeah, he just, he just breaks into the cabin and changes the direction of the boat. And then...
Because it was you're right, it was really tense, too, because he scratched the message on the hull of the or on the floor of the ship, and no one on the ship spoke English.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, no.
Yeah.
But that was a nice way to peek out the climax where he just finally just exerts the last of his energy and gets him saved. So
yeah,
that was really good.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple touching scenes of him and Maureen staring at the sunset together, and it just kind of a good way to cap off that character development. So That was one of my favorite stories out of the book.
Yeah, that was a really
Or
good one. That was one of the longer ones.
yeah, particularly I really liked all the scenes of him describing the aquatic life and how detailed the art was.
Yeah,
Whenever he was drawing all the seaweed or the sea life.
the sea life. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Let's talk about the art a little bit. Paul
yeah.
Chadwick, he's got a very photorealistic style.
It was so crisp.
Hmm.
Man, that shocked me because like the cover, the cover of the book we read was kind of vague almost. Like
Well,
there
it
was
is.
some stuff going on, and then I open it to the first page, and it's like, whoa, this is really really high quality stuff. Like
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, it's not really stylized. His art is really like still life representation of reality.
very defined lines. You know,
Uses a
every
lot of good shadow to kind of
yeah
create features on people, and also uses there's a really good use of lack of lines to create features too. Like a lot of times they'll just kind of let the inks of the shadows like create the outline for the face. So it almost has like an appearance of emptiness, except like you'll just
right.
see like the eyes and the mouth and like two little dots for the nose. But because of the way the shadow frames around it, you can see that it looks like
Our brain pieces it together
it looks like it
essentially.
was
Yeah,
traced from a photograph almost.
right.
You know, or and I'm sure some of it definitely had, like I said, it's a really photorealistic style.
I'm really glad it was in black and white too. I felt like it was so strong
Hmm.
because it was black and white. Has this book been colored?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, because I don't know. I something about it just really sticks out to me because it's black and white. Like
Hmm.
it feels really genuine. I guess like it allows the lines to look that much more crisp and the outlines to be that much more heavy. It's
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
yeah
yeah, like I said, the style of the art is really made. It's almost made to be in black and white. All the
right
definition is handled in the inks. So, like a colorist obviously would be able to go over this and add light sources. The light sources are already done in the ink work, so they
right
would just be able to add a little bit of definition, a little bit of shading. But it's really defined artwork, just
yeah.
in the pencil and ink.
And you said he drew and wrote this?
Yeah, he did all the artwork. It was lettered by. I think all of the stories are lettered by. There it is. The first page credit. Yeah, the lettering is by Bill Spicer. But yeah, story and art by Paul Chadwick.
It's so impressive. Like
Mm.
I know just from working in my field that each one of those processes is a lot of work.
Oh, yeah.
So the fact that he was able to do both and produce such a quality story it's really
Yeah,
impressive.
I mean, this is definitely the kind of comics that I really like, which are really personalized comics.
Yeah, you can tell that, like it's heart and soul
Yeah,
into
everything
this.
about this is Paul Chadwick. I mean, that's kind of what makes it a masterpiece. Like, this is just like one guy creating something so great.
And I mean like it instantly roped me in.
Hmm.
Like there was no downtime whatsoever for this whole book. I just couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
Even just strictly from a visual standpoint, like the art was just so gorgeous.
Hmm.
When I first opened the book, I was blown away. And then as it starts getting into it, it's such a surreal concept from what I'm used to. It's out of the ordinary, and it instantly just hooked me. I
Yeah.
couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah, it's such a like the book really. I really recommend it to people who like to read. It's such a good gateway book. Like people who like superheroes, I think you could read this and really get something really interesting out of it because it's a real, honest to goodness, like how would a character like this exist in the real world kind of a story.
I mean, yeah, it feels so real. Like
But people who like non-genre fiction, just stories about real people in real situations and just like emotional character drama, you would also really get something out of this because that's what it is. It just has that slight little element of a guy who is not quite human. But I really do kind of equate it to something like Kurt Vonnegut, which is funny because Kurt Vonnegut is kind of referenced in the book.
Oh yeah, because Marine's last name is Vonnegut.
Marine's last name is Vonnegut, and so
every time she introduces herself,
yeah.
someone asks any relation.
Yeah, they make that joke, like, yeah, no relation to the writer. So, but obviously Paul Chadwick is a fan of Kurt Vonnegut because Kurt Vonnegut kind of is one of those writers who he sort of writes science fiction, but it's elevated to the level of literature. Like it's literature with a little science fiction twinge to it in many ways, and that's actually what I would equate Conrete to. It really is that sort of like it's not genre science fiction. It's literature. It just has a little bit of an angle of science fiction in it.
Yeah, specifically from this upcoming chapter. I mean, right after the shipwreck chapter.
Yeah.
And it's like even that is like bordering being sort of believable, but prior to that, every other aspect of the book is totally, I could see this happening. So yeah, that was pretty much the end of the shipwreck chapter.
Yeah.
It segues into Conrete telling Larry about how he became Conrete for real, because the biggest reason why he was this big media, I don't even know the word to describe
celebrity,
it. Yeah, he was just this big celebrity is because they were trying to take the edge off of the real reason why he was the way he was. They were trying to get the public to not even try to dig into it. And
they were trying to get the public bored with him.
Yeah, so by the time it actually came out of what he really was, people wouldn't care.
Right.
And, they even did a timed leak of he was an alien and some, and it was like from some tabloid or something, and it didn't hold any weight. No one believed it.
Yeah,
it was just all conspiracy theories.
The Inquirer or whatever.
Right, kind of poking fun at, Inquirer now. And, so then it segues into what really happened of him explaining it to Larry.
Yeah.
And I forgot that you told me that it was that whole alien, I guess, aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever it revealed that to me, and how it did it, it was really neat. It was kind of messed up to a degree, how he was getting like tortured to see how much the body could withstand.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, the origin story is the only time that like supernatural or science fiction elements are really ever shown in the book, and that's basically just sort of like a necessary story to tell of how he gets his body. And even then, and the way he gets his body basically is he's abducted by aliens who transplant his brain into this giant.
Well, he stumbles into the cave,
yeah,
right, with his friend.
He and a friend stumble into this cave. They see this light, and they stumble
that is an alien spaceship.
And there's an alien spaceship in the cave. Like the whole mountain is this alien spaceship, and the cave is like an entrance to the ship. So they stumble into it, and the aliens capture them, and he wakes up, and his brain is in this body. And later he sees the aliens. One of the aliens has their brains in his body, and so basically they switch brains. And but even then, it's still like sort of like this fantastic science fiction story. But even then, it's so mounted in this non-tropes, realistic storytelling that you never really learn anything about the aliens because it's all told from the main
none of them
character's
talk
point
either.
of view. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that you just hear it from the the character's point of view. He tells the story as he knows it, which is basically he has no idea what's going on. The aliens just
he just woke up.
He just woke up. They put his
was in a body of concrete,
and they're running these tests on him. Yeah, like you said, to just sort of like see what he can do. He doesn't even know what the meaning of the tests are, and they never find out. Because basically
they break out before that.
Yeah, they're able to escape, and his friend. It's ambiguous what happens to his friend. His friend either dies or gets recaptured by the aliens, and the ship leaves and flies off, and he is able to escape to Earth. And he goes to his friend, the senator, and senator. And basically, the government just kind of like locks him down, and they start studying him.
Which I really liked too, that he went to the senator, because it kind of looped it back around to how he knew him and why he put up with him. I do like that the senator that he went to visit when he became Conrete was so understanding and willing to help him.
Yeah,
because
I mean
it's tough.
that was his friend that he worked for. He was the speechwriter for him. So.
Yeah, even the senator was like, "I'm really gonna hate losing you as a speechwriter."
Yeah.
Like, just showed that little bonding moment between, or not bonding, but he cares about him.
Yeah, basically, so he goes to the government and they start running tests on him, and that's where he meets Dr. Maureen Vonnegut, no relation to the writer. And he kind of like, basically, Maureen is like one of the only reasons he kind of puts up with everything because, she's a really great person and she's pleasant to be around, and she kind of keeps him like
Grounded, I guess.
tethered to humanity, yeah. So he's able to finally work out a deal with the government where they agree that he will go public as a cyborg. They can't let the world know that aliens exist, so they just have to pretend that he's got a government-made cyborg body. And
he even questions it too prior to the deal.
Believe it, yeah.
Right, we don't have this technology yet.
And I do like that the government's basically like, people will just
they'll eat it up. Who cares?
They won't care, And like the basically the conditions are, he'll go along with everything as long as, like, he has to have a government aid basically to kind of keep.
And it has to be Marine.
And he says he'll go along with that only if it's Marine. So that's how we get Marine into the their relationship. And basically that kind of the origin just kind of leaves off with him in this sort of celebrity status. Like, now he's Conrete. He's sort of this celebrity, this sort of world's first cyborg Superman.
Just going on talk shows and, which I like the talk show scene.
Yes.
Where he's on, was it Letterman or something?
I don't think they specifically said. It might have been Johnny Carson.
But even so, I liked the scene where he went on the talk show. Especially because, like, right before that, it's doing this big, like, merchandise kick of all these, crappy action figures and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Right in the bottom corner, I almost missed it. It just says, serendipitously, Pet Rocks enjoyed a comeback.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, come on.
Yeah, Conrete gets famous, so Pet Rocks become famous too.
Right, because, they're like, we're going to shovel out this stuff that they're just going to have a sensory overload of Conrete.
Exactly.
Yeah, like we were saying.
Just to make everybody sick of Conrete.
Yeah, so whenever the truth finally came out, everyone's like, who cares? Like, who's Conrete?
Yeah. So that way he can just kind of go about living his life as close to normal as possible.
Yeah. There was a panel too later on after the talk show interview where someone tries to do the whole like assassination bit on him. He's riding in the van or whatever, and someone comes up to him and says, "Death to the alien monster," and shoots him. And he has the most like bored, just does not care look on his face. Yeah. And he's just like, I can't believe this is happening.
That's really good comedic timing, because he's in the back of a truck, and somebody drives by and says "Death to the alien monster" and shoots at him. They shoot out the window, and he basically has like a Charlie Brown moment where he just kind of like is sitting there covered in glass, and he says, "It's beginning to sink in. My life has changed."
That was a really, really funny little side anecdote thing, because that's kind of playing on the whole people don't like different stuff. Yeah, blah blah blah. God, I hated that Anonymous guy though.
Yeah, they did.
That guy was such a jerk.
Well, that was one of the stories of Conrete goes on the talk show, and one of the other guests is that one of these insult comedians, which is really funny. It's like insult comedians have kind of made a comeback lately, like within the last like 10 years, I guess. You had the Conan O'Brien Triumph, the Insult Dog, all the like celebrity roasts that Comedy Central does. But it was a big thing. Don Rickles was a famous kind of like insult comedian, I believe. You know what? I'm gonna fact check that right now so I don't look like a total idiot. If we, So Don Rickles was a frequent guest on the Tonight Show, with Johnny Carson, and he was a famous insult comic. So that's really what that was a reference to, this character of Anonymous. But the difference was in the comic, he's called Anonymous, and he wears a big moose head mask, so nobody knows who he is. So But again, that's a really nice uh, emotional connection between the characters, because Anonymous is like Conrete, where he's presented as somebody who's, because he's anonymous and he's wearing a mask and he's detached from reality, he can say all these mean and hilariously insulting things, and people eat it up and they like it.
Because you can't associate a person to it. It's just the image of the character.
Exactly. And that's, Conrete is also separated from humanity, but he doesn't just say whatever he wants. Like he feels this
Obligation.
yeah, this longing to like get his connection back. But yeah, so that was, yeah, definitely the character of Anonymous was supposed to make you angry, cuz
He was written very well to do that.
yeah, he was a big jerk.
Because then Conrete just explodes.
Yeah, and they have
Oh no, I'm sorry. He has the vision that he would explode.
This vision where he's like, oh, maybe underneath the mask he's this horribly disfigured person, and he can expose him, and then everybody will know what a terrible person he is. But then it'll be this big tragedy, and he'll like he kind of like indulges this fantasy, like the guy will commit suicide because everybody knows what a freak he is. But then of course he doesn't do it, and he just lets the guy go, and that's the end of it.
That's the end of it, yeah. Because he's even like, yeah, no hard feelings, right?
Right.
And it's like, whatever. But yeah, because then it kind of segues into, I believe, the last little story of that was like the last part of that story was the talk show scene, I believe.
Yeah, the talk show scene was like the last of the origin story.
Yeah, and then it segues into Larry gets news that his brother crash landed a plane.
That's correct. Yeah, that's the story. Where Conrete goes into they're somewhere in the northeast, like the forests, and his brother is a stuntman who works in Hollywood, who was flying a plane, and the plane went down and nobody knows what happened to it, and people get lost in giant wooded areas, especially when planes go down, because it's really hard to just comb the area, and you can only see so much from a plane. You know what I mean? Especially in a heavily wooded area, it's really difficult to see wreckage. And so that's one of the things that they take Conrete. He's got this perfect vision, so he can just sit in the plane and kind of scope out the area. And he eventually finds the plane and is able to rescue the guy. But that's a nice little like almost superhero story, because like
they let him have his victory.
Yeah,
kind
like
of thing.
He gets down and he saves the guy, but like in doing so he has to fight a bear, and the bear really messes him up.
Yeah, it makes him bleed.
Yeah, the bear cuts him open, so he starts bleeding, and then the bear like slashes at his face, and he thinks he's blind. He's afraid he's blind, but the bear does cut his face, but I guess it just like blood gets.
He can't see because the blood's in his eye. Yeah,
blood's in his eyes, and he thinks he's blind, so he starts going crazy, and he's luckily like hits the bear on accident, but then he accidentally steps on the girl's leg and breaks her leg.
The girl with
Larry's
brother.
Right?
Yeah,
there's another girl there, and so he's looking like he's going to save her from the bear, and he breaks her leg, and just basically like barely saves the day. Like she's able to, like he's afraid he's blind, and she like wipes all the blood off, and he's like, oh, this is pretty humiliating,
right?
Because he realizes he's not blind. And
another little callback to the fact that he's not immortal, he's not invincible.
Yeah, exactly.
And
the bear almost destroyed him.
Right. I mean, it's a bear.
It's a big bear. Bears are big. Yeah.
They are. You're right.
Yeah.
And then, does that segue into the scene with the Duke? Or is there... Okay.
The next the longer story is Conrete gets hired to be the bodyguard for the Duke.
Because they're saying he's not utilizing his talents correctly or something.
Right, yeah. And the Duke, in this context, is basically Prince.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's this, like, wacky, far-out...
Eccentric yeah.
Guitar-playing celebrity, rock star, god kind of guy. And, yeah, he's the Duke. It's a very obvious allusion to Prince, Duke, Prince. But in the story of the Duke, that character is obsessed with John Wayne. also known as the Duke. So that's kind of where he gets his name. But yeah, that's a good little story, just kind of about Conrete having to deal with the like totally
getting kind of taken advantage of due to
exactly,
his
yeah.
situation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they get a death threat on the Duke because he's this gigantic rock star, and someone calls in and says they're going to shoot him.
Basically, what happens is Conrete goes on tour with the Duke, and he has to deal with the crazy people, like the crazy fans that are obsessed with him.
Right, which happens with any
Yeah.
giant
The crazy guy that's threatening to sue him for stealing his song that he never wrote, that kind of a thing. And then he starts to get suspicious because they keep getting these threats. Somebody keeps calling and saying, "I'm gonna shoot. I'm gonna kill the Duke tonight." And he starts getting suspicious of this car that he keeps seeing following the tour van around. And he eventually does, at the final show, see a guy with a gun. Like,
thanks to his increased eyesight.
To his increased eyesight. So he jumps on the Duke, gets him out of the way of any gunfire. And
the fans think they killed him,
yeah,
too.
exactly. So he has to kind of like fight his way through the fans without hurting anybody to get through the crowd to go chase after the guy with the gun. And then he doesn't catch the guy. Like, he's chasing the guy gets in his car and he's chasing him, and basically the guy crashes his car. That's the only reason he's able to catch up with him. And then, of course, the guy gives him his big sob story about how he used to be partners with the Duke. He was his old manager, and then the Duke turned on him. And, he didn't really want to kill the Duke. He was just he's just all messed up and betrayed, and he didn't know what he was going to do about it. And they do that nice joke. There's a big scene earlier where the Duke and Conrete have a big bonding moment.
Oh yeah, the Duke reveals his real name.
Yeah. And the Duke's going on about how difficult it is to be a celebrity, how you've always got to be evolving and changing, and you got to be everything to everyone, and all this crazy talk. And then he's like makes a big deal out of how he's like he wants to tell Conrete his real name, and he says his real name like after all this like big emotional scene. He's like, my real name is Alan Martin, just a regular guy, And then after this sob story from this would-be assassin, Conrete's like, all right, well, how am I supposed to know, everything that you're saying is true? So he goes, so if you're really this guy who you say you are, tell me the Duke's real name. And the guy goes, it's Marcus Garvey Allensburg. But sometimes he tells people it's Alan Martin after making a big deal of it. He likes making fools of people.
Oh,
yeah.
That was like another like last ditch.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Like, Conrete's been getting taken advantage of this whole time.
Right, kind of driving that point home.
So that's kind of a good little joke. Like, Conrete basically lets the guy go in exchange for giving him all this information, and they write a tell-all book about the Duke.
And that he just blows up after it.
Yeah, it just totally blows all of the Dukes.
Which was kind of a nice little ending, or a nice little package on the book. It kind of brought everything together of he got another good victory after being taken advantage of.
Yeah, because it's really about, like, a lot of these stories are about how Conrete wants to help people, and a lot of times he does help people, but not like, again, I keep saying this over and over again, but he's not helping people through traditional superhero tropes by just like saving them from the burning building or rescuing them from the supervillain. In a lot of cases, he's helping people with emotional problems or like characters that, or he's helping them, in very human ways. He's not using his superpowers to help people. He's just helping them by the connections that he makes with them, and
he just happens to have this enhanced
exactly
physique.
Yeah,
which is saying it again, just it's that idea of like a superpowered being, but disconnecting it from normal superhero-esque things. So which was nice. It was a refreshing, different look at quote unquote superheroes.
It's done really, really well.
Yeah, incredibly well. I really, really like this book a lot.
Yeah,
I went into it knowing I'd like it, obviously, but
I told you a little bit about it. I told you what to expect.
Enough. You told me enough, but you didn't spoil the whole thing.
Yeah, I didn't really want to give you any specifics, but I told you about how it's like a real world take on superheroes, which is almost misleading because real world take on superheroes. You say the same thing about, or I should say, people say the same thing about Watchmen, which I would say is accurate, and they also say the same thing about Kick-Ass by Mark Miller,
which I don't
which I
think
would say is
is
not
accurate.
accurate. But that's neither here nor there. This book is so much more than even either of those. I love Watchmen dearly, but this is a different kind of book than Watchmen. This is
Yeah, it's apples and oranges,
yeah,
really. It's
exactly, yeah.
so yeah, that was Concrete.
Yeah, there's a few other short stories here. Like
Would you say they're worth reading?
I mean, obviously, I think they're all worth reading. They do another one where he goes diving, deep sea diving with the manta rays. Yeah, he goes deep sea diving like at night, so it's even more dangerous than the one where he was swimming the Atlantic because there's no light, so he can't really tell. Like when you get so deep, you can't really tell which way is up because you can't see anything. And like I do like how it sort of becomes a disaster. Like he loses his flotation device and he basically
Pretty much like clockwork. So
yeah,
you
exactly. Like
it's right on the money.
he thinks he's getting attacked by a shark and he kind of like basically gets trapped and he's just like, "Oh, I'm stuck at the bottom of the ocean and surrounded by plankton and manta rays and I'm going to die." And then of course what saves him is that he glides on the back of a giant manta ray and it basically just swims him up to the surface. And they kind of do that whole like he had this connection with the manta ray. He doesn't really know what the deal was, but it was taking him up to the surface for some reason.
Going back into that like nature earthy
Yeah,
element.
exactly.
Yeah,
And you hear
being
stories
connected
about
with
that
Earth.
all the time of people talking about like dolphins, like animals that just like instinctively know to help people. Like it happens. And there's really no way to really explain it. Like it just animals just have that instinct sometimes.
It's like that sixth sense.
Yeah. Concrete is a really good book.
Yeah, I'm definitely a fan. Mark Chadwick, is that what you said?
Paul Chadwick.
Paul Chadwick. Okay, yeah. I'm definitely going to look into the other Concrete stories because I really like the world he's established.
Yeah, I've got some more Concrete books, so maybe we'll do some more for the podcast, or I'll just have to give them to you to read anyway.
Yeah, either one works. So yeah, that was Concrete.
Yeah, I think we pretty much said everything we need to say about Concrete.
I obviously was a gigantic fan of it.
It's a book that has let's see, it has won. I mean, it's a really good book, and it's sort of like it's an industry renowned book. The book has won an Eisner Award for best writer artist. Paul Chadwick won that in 1989. So for his work on Concrete. So like, and the Concrete has won several other awards, like the book itself. So like, this is a renowned book. Like
it wholeheartedly deserves every bit of praise it gets.
Yeah, absolutely. So people who love comics or people who are looking for comics that like really represent more than the average comic. I mean, you cannot do any better than Concrete.
I really feel like this book kind of has something for everyone. Like it sort of transcends the superhero genre because it's not really a superhero story, but there's enough there to rope in those fans.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There's enough there to rope in those fans, but that's not what it is at all.
I do like that. Like you said, there's that little bit of a hook there to kind of like get you interested, but then it really gives you something so much more.
Yeah, it is a focus, but it's not the main focus. Like the fact that he is this gigantic concrete body, it's a section of the plot that moves everything forward. But like you were saying, there's so much more there to keep you hooked.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm really, really glad we got to read this book.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was Concrete.
Paul Chadwick.
Paul Chadwick. Yeah. Next episode, we are going to be reading probably one of my absolute favorite single issues of a comic book ever created. And that is, believe it or not,
New 52 Superman.
No. The book we're doing on the next episode is going to be Deadpool number 11. That is the first volume 1 of the series. It was published in 1997, written by Joe Kelly and drawn by Pete Woods. This is a classic comic book of the 90s, one of the rare, quote, rare good comics published by Marvel Comics in the 90s.
The big Marvel boom in the 90s, yeah.
Well, there was a big boom and there was a even bigger bust. And
Yeah.
This was one of the few really good comics to kind of come out of that bust.
The diamonds in the rough.
Yeah. So I'm excited to talk about that because it's a really good book, and Deadpool is a character that carries a lot of
stigma.
Yeah, well, yeah, a lot of something, I'll say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love him.
He's got a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love him or hate him. It's yeah. So anyway, next episode we're going to be talking about Deadpool number 11. Thank you everybody for listening to us while we talked about Conrete on this episode. My name is Aaron Walther, and as always, you can find me on Facebook, Aaron Walther on Facebook. You can also find the comics that I have written and drawn at newhavencomics.com. You can find New Haven Comics on Facebook as well, and I'm also on Twitter at AAWALTHER. That's AA Walther at Twitter.
You can find me on exclusively just on Facebook right now, Luke Moritz. Yeah, if you want to, shoot us some ideas, if you want to.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. I was going to bring that up. This is what do we say? This is the
9, episode 9.
Yeah, so we're going to be looking. It is early December while we record this episode, and we record these episodes way ahead of the time we actually get them out to air. But we're looking at increasing our schedule, and for the next year, for the new year, we're probably gonna start putting out more episodes. So anybody who is listening to this podcast and who does like listening to it, if you have any books that you suggest we read or anything you'd like to hear us talk about,
yeah, please shoot it to either of us.
Make a comment anywhere. Make a comment on New Haven Comics. Make a comment on the Podbean. I should have said you can find episodes of the podcast as always at comicdna.podbean.com. Throw us a comment on there. Let us know what you want us to read and talk about, and we'd be more than happy to. Because I'm always looking for new comics to read, because
as am I.
There are too many comics as it is. My list of stuff I haven't read is still huge. Let us know, and I guess that about wraps it up. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll see you next time with Deadpool.
All right, we'll see you all next time.